there, friends, and thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale, and joining me, as always, the man to my right, the merman, carrying his Fiji water, Fiji merman, Big Fizzy.
How's it going, everybody? Yes, I am here. I do have some Fiji water in here, and in this bottle of water, I have mixed some liquid IV.
I wasn't going to say anything when you came in, but it looked a little hazy when you come in with it. And I'm like, well, maybe that's just a thing. I didn't realize that you have in turn doctored it up.
Yeah, no, I like to put these little packages of liquid IV in there.
In your Fiji water.
In my Fiji water. I think this is an empty bottle. I think this is just tap water.
The strongest thing in your body is your kidneys right now.
Yeah, that's correct.
Clean and strong. Can't say much about everything else. Liver, no. Lungs, no. But the kidneys
are good.
Jamming. How you been, Biggin?
I've been good, man. I'm good. I know. I appreciate people have been asking me about my foot. I do not have the brace on. I did not make it to the full 6 weeks like the doctor recommended, but
Shocker.
I did wear it for about 4,
Shocker.
and it feels good. No, I think I tried it out a little bit, and it doesn't seem to be bothering me. So I have not worn it in probably 3 days. I'm going to continue down this path and
see how it goes.
Something goes wrong, it's completely on me. But yeah, it feels good.
Well, I can tell you right now, if y'all hear it in our voices, the wind has gotten up like it has everywhere else across this great country, it seems like, and it's blown in here. Man, I am wheezing. I feel like it's blown dust in my face directly into my lungs. So we're going to try to get through that. But it's been wild. You know, I guess weather for everybody here in the States has been pretty crazy the last few days. It's been pretty wild.
It has. Hey, and speaking of wind, my heart's out to those people in Kentucky and stuff. Yeah. It looks like the tornadoes really devastated that place.
Terrible.
It's one of those freaky things, you know. We live right in the middle of Tornado Alley, so pretty used to it growing up here my entire life. But it is crazy how fast it can show up. Like literally, I've been on days where it's a little overcast, a little windy, and then 30 minutes later, there's a twister coming.
Yeah, it's powering. Yeah,
man, we've talked about it and joked about it on prior shows about the people that are storm chasers. I could never do that. They terrify me.
No. And I'll tell you something else that's terrifying, homie. I got something here that comes from not too far from us.
Okay.
South Central Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
The Chickasaw Nation. Okay. The Chickasaw Nation is actually some of my wife's family is in the Chickasaw Nation. So
really, get
a load of this. A construction crew from the Chickasaw Nation in South Central Oklahoma encountered an unknown humanoid. He goes on to say that attacked and killed and then fed on one of the workers.
Okay. Do tell more. Yeah.
You're going to like this. They are unknown beasts not to be trifled with. They are terrifying and dangerous, but I'm not positive, right here, that our encounter was with something like a skinwalker or something maybe much more dangerous. This incident happened in South Central Oklahoma in the Chickasaw Nation a few years back. I was working for this construction crew, and we'd been hired to do some work on this cabin some rich guy wanted renovated. Simple enough work that, well, in just some new inner walls and new insulation, new roof, some solar panels for a little off-grid action, and other than being in the middle of literally nowhere, it wasn't that difficult. It was 2 weeks' work and solid pay, so it wasn't much of an issue with us. That came on the 3rd day of work. One of the guys on the crew, named Jay, was already there. That was odd on his own since he was, well, always late. But what made it even odder was the way he was acting throughout the day. Then he just up and disappeared around lunchtime. And then again, that itself was odd since he normally worked through lunch, so we didn't expect him to disappear. So me and another one from the crew, we'll call him B, went off to find him while the rest got back to work. So we went to the trucks and we couldn't find him. We were about to make our way back to the shed when B pointed something out. There was a trail of blood leading from the trucks into the forest, and obviously, we thought something happened to Jay and followed the trail. It didn't take us long to find out exactly what happened to him. So we found his body, and from the looks of it, he'd been there all night. B almost threw up at the smell of the body. I was about to tell him to run back and get the others when I heard Jay call out to us. But he was lying dead there in front of us. Then B screamed, and then I saw why. Standing in front of us was some twisted version of Jay. It didn't look right or natural. I mean, it had his face, but it was all pasty and flaking off. There were horns on his or its head, and it had this open smile that showed fangs rather than the normal human teeth. It was horrifying. It just stood there staring at us while drooling. Neither of us are scared easily, but both B and I started running the moment it started walking towards us. Now, not 15 minutes, we returned with the rest of the crew and carrying a few guns that we kept in the trucks. That damn thing was still there, eating on Jay. I was carrying one of the guns, as was our boss. We both fired a few rounds at it, but it didn't even flinch. Then the elder in our crew said something I couldn't quite make out before firing another shot. It was hit and went down before getting up, howling and screaming at us before running away on all fours. It was still wearing his face, though. All of this, the whole time, had his face. Jay had been torn to shreds, and his death was eventually ruled as an animal attack. But to this day, I wouldn't consider whatever that thing was an animal. Now, I'd later ask the elder what he said before taking the shot, but he would refuse to ever talk about it. We managed to complete the renovations without any more issues, but I later found out that the guy who owned it went missing during a stay at the cabin. I never want to see that thing again.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So what could it have been? A dog man? A skinwalker?
Dude, it sounds like a skinwalker, does it not?
A wendigo?
Yeah. Man, I don't know what that could have been. But
I imagine you're hunting with your pals or out just, hanging out. And one of them gets killed by some unknown animal like that. Like, how do you report that?
Yeah, what would you say?
Without seeming kind of fishy. Like, well, we saw it. We shot at it.
If they were 3 or 4 of you, right? Like you're talking about, and you get involved in that, how do you report it? We had those fellas on, like we always talk about, that had shot the dog man, had all that going on. But you have 3 or 4 people that witnessed it and found the whole thing. It's one thing if they had come back, said what they had said, and went and all that, but all of them go back, it's still there, and 4 people witness 2 others, or 2 people witness 2 others shoot it.
Yeah.
And
without looking suspicious yourself.
Dude, I can't imagine even trying to explain this to police other than going, I guess it was a bear, man. Because just saying this makes me wonder how many of these reports out there right now of people that have died, let's say, from animal attacks, maybe had something like this with it. They just refuse to talk about it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, imagine trying to explain to like their buddy Jay's family.
Just try to explain it to your friend. Imagine you trying to explain seeing something like that, feeding on something on the side of the road just to me.
Yeah.
Go, look, I'm going to have to tell you something. But when it's a person, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of crazy, check this out. Lon recently shared this.
Yes.
He said there have been a number of sightings of an unknown flying being in Puerto Rico's natural tourist attraction called El Yunque. Now, me and my wife have been to El Yunque when we went to Puerto Rico, and it's an amazing rainforest. It's cool. Like, there were snails in there the size of dinner plates. I mean, it's crazy. Crazy place. So I'm not shocked at all that there's something unknown living in there, but the reports that have been coming out of this place, it's a lot like what you've covered on past shows.
Really?
Gargoyles.
Yes.
It says, I feel free to share its name considering I'm not putting them or anyone in danger. The locality is called Memayas Arriba, and older folks talk about the giant bird that flies from that mountain to the local beach. I'm saying that most locals have seen it. I mean, literally 8 out of 10 people have either seen it, heard of it, or have been close enough to see it. This thing, whatever it is, makes 0 sound. It might perch on a rooftop or a fence post. It's almost like 7 foot or 8 foot tall, and it's often described as looking like a tall shadow. Now, during one instance at around 4 a.m., my dogs were going crazy. They were extremely agitated, which infuriated me. As I walked towards the window, about 4 feet from the wall in which the windows were, I heard something perch on the chain link fence. It was definitely too heavy to be a cat and sounded more like human, but who was very agile. There was no rebound in the landing, kind of like how a bird would land. I thought it was someone jumping over the fence. Now, we live in a small neighborhood, so whoever it was, theoretically, I would know him or her. I slowly cranked open my window as silently as possible, and I started scanning around the fence. My dogs are hiding, and everything is quiet at this point. Then, the massive weight lifts from the fence, and then I heard a second sound, a loud thump, like an adult man jumping and landing on overgrown grass. At this point, I guess my neighbor to the right was also cranking open his window because at this point it had crossed from my property over to his. He took his flashlight and started scanning the area, and I can tell you two things right away. It was very agile. It is very smart. The gargoyle, as we took to calling it, ducked out of the flashlight range behind some trees. Now, I was frozen in place from panic. While looking at this massive thing, I couldn't hardly describe it. Acknowledging how smart it was, I became even more terrified. It was massive. The legs were curved like hooves, and it was making sounds as if cats were fighting. And at the time of writing this, the neighbor caused to back away and shut his window in a rapid movement. I assumed that was natural, this sound, but I don't know. What if it was mimicking cats fighting to manipulate us into ignoring the sounds it made? I don't know. Also, I'm not a teenager just writing creepypastas. This is very real. Yunque has a second mountain top near it. People there have known for generations about a gargoyle that stalks in the trees and eats cats, dogs, etc. It's also known for breaking into chicken coops. I was tempted to install cameras around that area and try to get some footage to back up my claims, but as of right now, all I have is this, my account. Locals have seen so much here. I'm surprised it has never gotten out to the media, but then again, they don't use social media much here. EA. Now that crazy, right? Not just this one sighting of gargoyles. There happens to be quite a few sightings over the years in the Yunque Forest. Also, there's been sightings of chupacabras, the lizard-like reptilian chupacabras, and also some other freaky things. Check this out. This story comes from late February 1991, where a guy named Freddie and his wife and young child were taking a drive around the rainforest area on Route 191. And after cruising the area, the road took a turn, and the pair inadvertently took a detour deep into the forest. And after a while, they came up to a camouflaged gate deeper in the forest, and after inspecting it, they decided to drive through it. Now, as they drove on the path in the woods, they noticed that it was well lit by blue light bulbs on each side of the road. They drove through some hills for about 2 miles when the road abruptly ended. At its end, there was a large metal gate and a building on the other side of it. At that moment, 2 6-foot-tall, man-like figures appeared and ordered the pair to stop their Jeep and asked who they were. The men wore tight-fitting black one-piece suits, resembling divers' outfits, a wide black belt, black gloves, and large black boots with gold-colored metallic straps. They also wore large, dark, oval-shaped helmets with dark visors. Their faces were not visible. Now, in an eerie, metallic, electronic-sounding voice, the strangers ordered the witnesses to step out of their car. The child remained sleeping in the back seat, and one of the men took a long, thin, metallic tube with a mirror-like tip and examined the vehicle. The figures asked the witnesses how they got there and then looked at the sleeping child inside. They then heard a short conversation in a grave, guttural language that resembled German. One of the men then left the area, and a blue pickup truck now arrived at the scene. The 2 men wearing the blue coveralls were in the vehicle, and they spoke in Spanish to the witnesses, again asking them how they got there. Then the men looked at the child and commented something in a low tone of voice to the strange figures in black that remained on the scene. Now, at that moment, Freddie said, while this was going on, he noticed a glint of light coming from what appeared to be a rectangular-shaped, hollowed-out area in the nearby wooded slope of a hill. There appeared to be several huge glass-like doors, and inside there was what appeared to be a disc-shaped object. He said it was encircled in rectangular-shaped windows and was about 30 foot in diameter. It appeared metallic and aluminum-looking in color. Now, thinking that he was seeing something he was not supposed to see, he quickly averted his gaze. He said the men did not appear to notice that Freddie had seen anything. The men in the blue pickup then ordered the couple and their child to follow them out of the area in their vehicle, and they were quickly escorted out onto the main road. So what a bizarre story. What did What did these people accidentally stumble upon?
Dude, right?
Some type of top secret military base, and even the sentries and stuff. Like, how did you get here? Like, how did you find? Like, this doesn't happen often. It's not like every once a week somebody turns off the road and ends up there. It's like, this is supposed to be like a really secret place. How did you get here with your family?
I don't know. We're just driving.
Crazy stories. The Yunque Forest is a crazy place. But speaking of crazy places, let's take a break. And when we get back from the break, I'm going to be talking about some more missing hunters. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Throughout history, people just sometimes seem to have stepped off the face of the earth to never be seen again. While in some cases, we get some answers. In many, many others, these are hard to come by. One very interesting area of this phenomenon is the cases in which very experienced people have gone out into the wilderness to never come back, regardless of how well they know the area or know the outdoors. After looking into numerous cases, a pattern will start to develop that I don't fully understand. Like, for instance, the reason canines cannot find a scent. In a very high percentage of the cases documented, bloodhounds brought to the point where the victim was last seen cannot find and will not find a scent. They aren't interested in tracking, or they seem oblivious to the scent completely. As anyone who has ever been around these kinds of dogs before, they absolutely love their job. They can't wait to get into the field and start tracking. So why in so many of these cases are the tracking dogs reluctant to want to track? The weather. In a majority of these cases of missing people, weather has a very significant impact in the rescue or recovery of the victim. The weather seems to take a turn for the worst just as the person is going missing, or just after they've disappeared. Bad weather includes blizzards, fog, rain, snow, dust storms, cold weather, and more. When you first hear about this, you'll think that sure, it was just bad luck. But the more and more cases you look into, you'll be blown away by how many times it takes place. Also, victims are found sometimes in an area previously searched. This too is mind-boggling. A staggering number of victims have later been found in an area that was previously searched, sometimes dozens of times. Clothing or their shoes are removed too. Oftentimes the victims are found without their shoes or missing pieces of clothing. It doesn't seem to matter the type of climate either. This has been documented in all types of weather. Sure, some people will say this is due to hypothermia, but some of the cases occur in warm weather, and yet a person still disappears and their clothes are found a few hundred yards away. Why? Times of disappearances, too, have very, very familiar similarities. The vast majority of the disappearances occur in the late afternoon or early evening, far more than in the morning, but I don't know why. It's a very strange thing. Me and Kim have talked about it dozens of times before on the show. I still don't have any other answers, but I know you people really like the missing people, and so today I'm going to get into a few more missing hunters. Let's begin. Melvin Nadell owned and operated a Pilates Fitness Plus near downtown Santa Fe, New Mexico. Melvin was a hands-on owner. He not only met people at the door and did the accounting for the business, but he also ran many of the classes himself. Longtime customers of the studio stated that one of the main reasons they enjoyed this particular studio was the class that Melvin taught. Now, Melvin's wife, Edna, operated a daycare facility out of their residence. Kristen, a certified fitness instructor, taught classes at the Pilates studio as well. The Nadels had moved to Santa Fe in 1991 from their original hometown, Brooklyn, New York. It's easy to say that a family is tight and enjoys each other, but the Nadels really did. Melvin and Kristen were extremely close, as Melvin had homeschooled Kristen until she went to community college. The family went on vacations together, they camped together, and they spent a significant amount of time at their business together. Melvin was a small man in stature. He was only 5'2", but a big man in town whom his customers loved. It seemed that everybody loved Melvin, and they loved the Nadel family. Prior to the Pilates studio, Melvin owned a jewelry business in town, and while in Santa Fe, he earned his black belt in Taekwondo and started his fitness regimen to keep himself healthy. You see, he knew the value of staying healthy, as both his mom and dad had died early in life. In the first week of September 2009, Melvin and some friends decided to go hunting in the Santa Fe National Forest, the Pecos Wilderness to be exact, in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Melvin drove his 2001 Jeep up to an area near 11,000 feet. He was near Pecos, 14 miles off New Mexico 63 and Forest Road 646. The extremely desolate and very rugged region contains many exposed boulders and steep cliffs. The reason I mention this is you would be surprised at how many people go missing around boulders, large boulders, to be exact, and cliffs. I don't know. Kind of reminds me of the Fae stories from the Scandinavian area. Anyways, late in the afternoon on September 6th, Melvin told his friends that he was going to walk down an adjacent trail 50 to 150 yards away, and he was just going to stay in that area. He had a slight knee injury, and he didn't want to walk too far. Melvin's specific type of hunting involved setting up a blind and sitting to wait for game to pass. He was carrying a camouflaged bow with zebra-striped arrows and a .44 caliber pistol as backup. At 4:30 p.m., Melvin Nadel started down the trail, never to return. His friends notified the state police, and they initiated a massive search. National Guard helicopters, law enforcement canines, horses, volunteers, and all-terrain vehicles swarmed the area. They searched the adjacent mountains without finding one trace of Melvin. No bow, no arrows, no handgun, no clothing, nothing. The search hampered just after the disappearance when 4 to 5 inches of snow dropped. The canines, brought into camp, started their search by walking directly down the trail where Melvin stated that he was going. At the 150-yard marker, they stopped. This validates that Melvin walked down the trail. But canines don't just stop without justification. The canines would not proceed farther than the marker. The official state police search for Melvin ended 6 days after it started. Edna and Kristen rallied all friends, family, and business relationships to keep the search going for almost 6 additional weeks. The 6-week period is a reasonable time to search for anyone who had a likelihood of being there, but the state police search of only 6 days seems short for a man who was in a superior condition and had the opportunity to survive. Law enforcement searched Melvin's Jeep and found the items they would normally expect. They could positively state that the only things missing were his bow, his arrows, his pistol, and that he was last seen carrying all 3. The vehicle had not been damaged in any way, and law enforcement did not consider foul play as an option in the disappearance. 1 year after Melvin Nadel's disappearance, State Police Lieutenant Eric Garcia stated that the Nadel case remains open and active and that many leads have been investigated, but none have yielded any evidence. David Politis goes on to point out in summary that there were several issues in the Nadel case that pop out as unusual. First, he mentions that Melvin is a fairly short man. He has long hair, to the shoulders, and in the back. If Melvin was approached by a predator from perhaps the rear, he could have been mistaken for a female hunter. Short height, long hair, Maybe this mistake led to his disappearance. To be a successful bow hunter, you have to be stealthy, more stealthy than the average hunter. You must have the ability to hide the human odor and to stay camouflaged, and to get very, very close to your prey. Did Melvin inadvertently get too close to something or someone? We know that Melvin went to the exact spot he told his friends he was going to, 150 yards down the trail. Why would a trained canine track exactly 150 yards down a trail and then stop? Canines are trained to continue to track the specific odor until it terminates, not stop. Odors don't terminate with the death or disappearance. 1 year after Melvin disappeared, Edna and Kristen filed paperwork in the Superior Courts of Santa Fe to have Melvin legally declared dead. Now, this was a standard request because the family needed Social Security benefits and the ability to transfer titles and local properties. The Santa Fe attorney who filed the case used the following logic in requesting the death certificate. I quote, "There are only two explanations for Melvin's disappearance. He either wandered off, got lost, and died of natural causes, exposure or animal attack, or was abducted, taken to an undisclosed location, killed, and his body disposed." The likelihood that Melvin was attacked by a mountain lion, bear, elk, or some other recognized mammal in New Mexico is nearly zero. He was armed. If Melvin had been attacked and killed, there would have been large evidence, a scene with blood, bones, and tissue. The area was not vacated long enough for animals to remove all of the evidence. He would have been pounded, at least in pieces. The possibility that Melvin was abducted and taken from the scene utilizing standard abduction techniques also seems extremely remote. Melvin was parked on the only road to the summit of Elk Mountain. Melvin was with friends, hunting the mountain also, and someone would have seen others in the area, but no one did. There is a general store that many frequent 20 miles from the disappearance. Workers would have seen others in the area, but they too didn't see anybody. Searchers scoured the area where he disappeared for 6 weeks, and they didn't find any illegal drug factories or grow patches, so this would not have been a motive. I believe, not me, but David says this, that he believes that Melvin was lying low, very low, in his blind. It was getting cold and dark, and he chose to hunt in the late afternoon, a time when animals start to come out. He believes that something surprised Melvin, something unusual, something fatal, and something he couldn't control and didn't expect. Imagine a search, a very thorough search where Melvin's weapons, clothing, and the supplies he was carrying were not found. How does that even happen? I don't know. I'd have to agree with Mr. Politis. It seems very strange that if you're hunting with friends and you have a bum knee and you're like, look, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to put any undue stress on my knee. I'm going to go right down the trail and I'm going to sit on that rock over there. You know exactly where it's at. And they're like, yeah, we know where that is. Okay, cool. Good luck. And then they never see him again. If he was attacked by something, wouldn't he have fired his pistol? If he would have fallen and broken his leg, and injured himself, same thing. Everyone's taught when you're out in the woods and you're hunting, if you have a firearm, to shoot 3 or 4 times. Your friends will hear all the shooting and know something's wrong. He did none of that. Very, very odd. Check out this next story David talks about. This took place in Oregon, and the person that it happened to was a 17-year-old male at the time. His name was Corey Fay. He says that the disappearance of Corey Fay, a student in Jesuit High School in Beaverton, Oregon, ranks as one of the most unusual disappearances involving a teenager. Corey was a junior in high school when he asked Mark Maupin if he could accompany him and his friend elk hunting in a region west of Teague Valley on the fringe of Badger Creek, of the Badger Creek Wilderness. Mark was a good friend and agreed to bring Corey along. Corey had had training in the outdoors, and he had training in outdoor survival, and he's hunted in the past, so he was no novice. He knew what to do in case of an emergency, or if he was ever lost. He carried an emergency solar blanket, a compass, extra food, ammunition, a small backpack, and perhaps most importantly, a rifle. The three young men arrived at their hunting spot and decided to split up around 6:30 p.m. When they had agreed to arrive back at the vehicle, that was the last time anybody ever saw Corey. The afternoon was cold and the hunting fruitless. Maupin later told investigators that they were in the correct spot, a spot he knew there would be elk, yet inexplicably, they didn't see any. When they arrived back at their vehicle, Corey wasn't there. He never arrived, so they called the sheriff. The Wasco County Sheriff's Office was the lead agency in the search for Corey. The SAR, or Search and Rescue, included helicopters with special search capabilities, equestrians, hikers, and 7 of the best trained search dogs in the world from the Rocky Mountain Search and Rescue in Salt Lake City. A total of 250 searchers scoured 12 square miles for 10 days and did not find one trace of Corey Fay. There were many theories about what happened to Corey. The one that got the most press supposed that he may have been accidentally killed by another hunter and then buried. However, cadaver dogs never found a gravesite. There were also theories that Corey may have survived for a long time, and one searcher thought he may have found a campsite with an old fire, but this was never confirmed. With so many searches and substantial air support on this SAR, it is doubtful to say that Corey lived very long after he initially disappeared. Otherwise, it would be believed that he would have been found. The official search was terminated on December 1st, but many volunteers kept the effort going for many weeks. The Wasco County Sheriff was so perplexed by Corey's disappearance and the lack of evidence that he called the FBI and asked for their assistance in unraveling what had happened. There wasn't much activity on Corey's case until September 1992, when 2 hunters were hunting a ridge 10 miles from the point where Corey was last seen. They found his backpack and his rifle. Another searcher found Corey's jacket more than a mile away from his other belongings. The hunters notified authorities. Corey's items were located at an elevation of 6,500 feet and 10 miles from where he was last seen. A quarter mile from his backpack, searchers found small bone fragments and one tooth. The sheriff stated that Corey would have been in the snow up to his waist for more than 5 miles at the point the discovery was made. An article in the Eugene Register in September 18th edition, 1992, reported the following. It says, authorities know the snow was deep there because a helicopter had spotted tracks during an intensive search for Fay last November. The tracks turned out to be animals, but the snow was almost waist deep. That was a good 3 miles from where the items were discovered yesterday. The article later states that searchers didn't believe Fay could have gone as far as he apparently did. An interesting side note to this finding is that a September 19th, 1992 article in the Eugene Register clearly states that Corey's grandparents told the press that the boy was trained to follow a stream downhill if he ever became lost. This is odd because the article makes you believe that Corey did just the opposite. The sheriff makes it clear that back in November 1991, his helicopter crews did see tracks on the ridgeline near where Corey was found. He makes it sound as though they landed and determined they were animal tracks. However, if the snow in the area was new and 4 feet deep, no helicopter would land there because it would blow the snow and blow the evidence away. This assertion by the sheriff sounds like he really didn't know, but was instead guessing. Corey was found 3,000 feet higher in elevation than where he was last seen, and 10 miles from the point he should have been hunting. Could he have covered this distance in elevation in less than a day in waist-deep snow? Remember, the sheriff stated that he didn't believe Corey could have made it that far, and that's why the search didn't focus on this location. Was the sheriff correct? Also, I'd like to remind you what they did find on the ridgeline. They did not find Corey's pants, boots, or socks. Boots are heavy. They don't disappear. What is equally unusual about the disappearance and the discovery of the remnants of Corey's body is that no skull was ever found, and only one tooth could be located. This is all that was recovered, even though the sheriff sent in 30 people to do grid searches of the ridgeline across a 1.25 mile area. Searchers did not find large bones normally associated with finding a skeleton, like femurs or ribs, hips, vertebrae, etc. This case disturbs me greatly, David talks about. The fact that searchers could not only find bone fragments, but no skull and only one tooth is highly unusual. The fact that Corey's gun, backpack, and other personal belongings were strewn along a ridgeline strikes me as bizarre. This is nothing any hunter would voluntarily do. Corey's disappearance and the sheriff's lack of initially finding evidence was deemed unusual when the search was nearing completion. Corey was a smart kid. He was well trained, and he knew not to walk uphill. Anyone who has spent any time outdoors in the winter knows that it gets colder the higher you go. Rain turns to snow, and that leads to hypothermia. Corey was trained to follow creeks and rivers downhill, which will eventually lead you to a roadway and civilization. So what happened to Corey? Man, I don't know. This is another one of these stories that I've read so many about that David has published in his books. People that are trained hunters, trained outdoorsmen, survivalists. If they were to get lost, why do they behave so erratically? Why would he go up in elevation if he knows the way down is to go down? Why would you go up where it's colder? Everybody who's in the mountains, you know civilizations, they don't build towns on the top of mountains. They're in the valleys. If you're lost, you go down the mountain to find a road or a town. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for anybody, but especially a trained outdoorsman. I don't know. Moving on. I got one more for you here. This took place in Idaho, and the kid at the time that he disappeared was only 14 years old. The Nallman family lived in Kellogg, Idaho. On September 6, 1959, Fred Nallman took his 14-year-old son, Ted, to eastern Idaho to hunt bear. The hunters were en route to the area of Moore Lake, which sits just 100 yards inside of Montana at the Idaho border. This is a very rugged area and has no less than 4 roads that surround the area of Moore Lake. The elevation of the ridgelines in this area is 6,000 feet. Fred and his son Ted arrived into the border area and spent the night. Early the following morning, the two hunters split up and attempted to stay reasonably close to one another. At the end of the hunting day, Fred returned to their campsite. However, Ted never arrived. Fred didn't wait long before enlisting the assistance of the local sheriff and Forest Service employees to help look for his son. The search for Ted was large for eastern Idaho. The sheriff was able to obtain a helicopter that covered ridges, mountains, and meadows in its effort to find the young hunter. However, searchers were compromised in their efforts as rain and snow fell almost the entire time they were in the field. 2 days into the search, rescue workers were able to locate a fisherman who had actually seen Ted late in the day that he disappeared. A September 11th article in the Eugene Register-Guard had the following information about Ted. It said, young Nallman was last seen by our fisherman, Don Pierce of Kellogg, on Monday afternoon. He said that Nallman asked him the direction to the roadway. Gardner said the youth had traveled the roughest stretch to the roadway and had only a quarter mile to do over a less rugged section when he faltered and died. The spot where the body was found was some 3/4 of a mile from where the father and son camped. Searchers continued to look for Ted and found him face down on a ridgeline Thursday afternoon, 4 days after he vanished. The same Eugene Register article had the following about finding Ted. It said, the body of Ted Nallman, son of Kellogg miner, was found face down on a timbered ridge in the Moore Lake area, about 15 miles south of St. Regis, Montana. The boy's shoes were missing, and so was the rifle he was carrying on a bear trip with his father over Labor Day. Ted was given an autopsy, where the coroner determined that the boy died to exposure. Now, David goes on to say that Ted was found a short distance from where the fisherman had spoken with him. And sometime in that short amount of time, the distance, something deadly happened to the young man. He was speaking, he was alive and in good condition, heading towards the roadway when he left the fisherman. How could things go so drastically wrong in such a short distance? He says people in the past remember stories where hunters disappear and soon their clothing is gone and their firearms disappear. How or why Ted's boots came off is one monumental question in this case. Hunters and fishermen must have footwear in the mountains, or they are quickly restricted in their movements and will suffer from exposure to the cold elements. It says many times hunters know that their lifeline is their rifle. They can summon help by firing it. Yet nobody heard one round come from Ted's gun. And also, where is his rifle? The fact that Ted's body was found face down on a ridgeline also does not make any sense, as this position indicates that the boy was unconscious when his face went into the ground, or he was placed that way. I wouldn't have liked to have been the first rescuer on the scene to see if he had any facial damage from hitting the ground. There were several discrepancies in the articles he said that he reviewed for this story. So, the question is, what happened to Ted? I mean, you go hunting with your father, and you're going to try to stay together, try to stay pretty close. You're going, and you bump into another fisherman. The guy talks to the fisherman, and then just a little whiles later, a short distance away, the guy is dead. Doesn't make any sense. Where was his gun? I don't know. These stories, they're super strange. And that's what makes them so intriguing. And I know that you like these, and we'll continue to do more of them. But for now, let's take a break. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Back with Expanded Perspectives.
Pow!
More and more stories of missing hunters, missing people. There's quite a collection. And just like always, I have no answers. It makes no sense how these people are going missing. And I think it makes a huge difference when it comes to somebody from the city, somebody who's not used to being in the woods. I think that they can be confused and can go missing very easily because they're not familiar with it. But of all the people that are comfortable in the woods, I mean, hunters are probably the most. Hikers and hunters, right? So
should be.
How is it that these people that are hunting in areas that they know where they're at, they're not confused? It's not some destination hunt like we've done before where you've never even been there before. These guys are hunting, and women, in places that they know exactly where they're at, yet they seem to make bizarre decisions that ultimately ends up in their demise, perhaps. And there's several theories, like when it comes to the missing clothes, that's because of the onset of hypothermia. But several times David has talked about how it wasn't even cold out when this happened. So there'd be no reason to remove your clothes. There's lots of times where hunters or fishermen will remove their boots. Now, I mean, any outdoorsman knows that, like, that's one of the last things you want to give up is your boots, because then you're going to have to walk out barefooted.
Yeah.
And finally, one of the things that's most bizarre is most of the time these people are armed. So, you've heard the stories of, maybe there's a serial killer loose in the national park. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's going to be hard for a serial killer to sneak up on you while you're hunting with a 270. That's going to be hard to do.
Yeah.
And so, these people, they not only go missing, but they don't find any of their weapons. Nothing.
It's still one of the most disturbing stories or veins of stories that we've ever covered is the missing people. We've covered so much over the years, but you and I always discuss like the missing people is our favorite thing to look into. I understand that you could get cocky, right? You could get real arrogant wherever you're at and really be like, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need that. It's one thing to be a little cocky and arrogant on a couple 100 acres. Like you don't have to take all your survival gear with you when you go to the deer stand, right? You don't have to haul all that. But if you're hunting the backcountry the way they're doing, maybe it's the same thing. You hunt public land, large swaths of backcountry, and you've done it so much that you've kind of gotten a little cocky, maybe a little arrogant. You've narrowed down your kit, things like that. Like I can understand how, accidents could happen. But when people go out there with the proper gear, or the even the craziest is whenever they go, I'm going to walk 200 yards to that stand of trees, and that's where I'll be.
Yeah. Like we're all going hunting for the evening.
Yeah,
where are you going?
Go
I know where I'm going.
Where I always sit. I'm going to go sit on the rock. And then you come back, and that dude's never been found. Where did he go?
Or how about when they search the area, like say, like
this is
you're talking about, they go missing. The search and rescue searches for days and days and days. They don't find anything. And then maybe like a week later or 10 days later, they'll find the body literally 200 yards from where they went missing.
Like right out in the middle.
How did they not spot that? Yeah. How did the dogs not find that? How did helicopters with FLIR and everything? I mean, like it just doesn't, there's no way we walked by that. It's almost as if someone places the body there after the search.
Yeah.
Why always the inclement weather? Why is there always seem to be bad weather right as the person's going missing, stopping them from conducting a thorough search? Like a lot of it just doesn't make sense. That's what I think makes it so bizarre. And also, unlike stories of flying gargoyles or monsters of the ocean, like these are real people. Like you can look up these people. These are actual people that went missing. So something happened to them. People that are 59, 70 years old, a happy life, just living the last of their days hunting. They wouldn't just get up and abandon their family. Like it just doesn't make sense. We've talked about the possible scenarios, like maybe somebody stumbled upon a weed grow, illegal grows and stuff. But a lot of the times when they're doing the search and rescue, people are doing this, they're not coming across these grows.
Yeah.
So it's super strange. And
you can, not to cut you off, but I always think about this is you could easily write a bunch of this off for the fact of, like we've talked about before, they always talk about inclement weather. Mm-hmm. Well, we know that weather changes extremely quickly in the mountains. Yeah. So it could simply be just, that's just what happens. It just so happens we were in the mountains and it goes. And you could explain that off a couple times, 2 or 3 times, even a couple dozen times. But when it starts getting down to you start looking at all the coincidences that have to line up with the way these people go and how they go missing and how I always think back to whenever one of the children went missing that we had covered. And they brought in the National Guard. And the National Guard went like 12 miles in another direction, and that's where they found him. Like they already had information nobody else had, and they knew like, oh, somebody went missing over here. If you go over those 2 bluffs and you get down in that little cedar break, that's where they'll be.
Yeah, or they find the child.
That's a door. Like that's almost like that's the portal they let them out at. That's where that's the interdimensional bus stop is down there in those cedar trees.
Multiple miles away.
Yeah.
Crossing rivers, crossing fence lines. They also find people going uphill. Well, if you're lost in the woods, the town's below you. Why would you ascend instead of descend? It don't make sense.
Yeah, a lot. It's very confusing and it's a very disturbing thing. And the other thing are the people that they find alive, kids to adults, never can tell you what happened.
Yeah.
They can never give you that information.
I slept with a bear last night.
Well, I mean, it's always like they're just like, I was in a haze. We're like, you'd understand he was in a haze for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
But when you've been in a haze for 2 or 3 days.
We had that one caller called in that said he started feeling strange and sick and ill, and he thought something like that was something. But how many of the stories you talk about where it's like a group of us walking down a trail? Like, we're not hunting. We're just walking down a trail, and then you turn around and you're like, where's Brandon?
Well, like the dude where they talked about
and they never see him again. You're like,
yeah, climbing the mountain, and he was in between the other 2.
Yeah,
like one guy went up, the other guy was at the bottom, the other guy was halfway up. They heard something, they're like, what? And they get to look, and the dude's not there. They never found him. It's like he vanished halfway up a mountain.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
there's plenty more. I'm going to be doing more on the Elite Show. If you're not a big fan or not a fan of David Paulides' work, Missing 411, you should check out. He's got about 10 books out now. My favorite is the Eastern edition and the Western edition, the first two, and I like the Hunters one, but they're all really good.
Yeah.
If you're going to order them, don't go on Amazon for whatever reason. There's super jacked up prices over there. Just go to Can-Am Project.
Get them from him.
And you can order it directly from his website. I'll put links to all that in the show notes.
I'd like to give a big shout out to Earl for sending Kyle and I a Blu-ray copy of Mel Gibson's Apocalypto.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Earl.
Yes.
Sorry, I know that you probably sent it a long time ago. I haven't checked the P.O. box in months, so that's all on me. Also, thanks, James. He sent us a really cool book. I appreciate things like that. If you have stories you want to share with me and Cam, do not hesitate to email the show, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com, or you can call the hotline and tell us your story. The fans really seem to like us playing the stories that people are calling in.
No matter how small or ridiculous you think it is, call in and leave it.
Yeah,
we like to hear it in your voices too.
I think I like hearing the people tell the stories too. I get tired of telling them myself all the time.
I'm tired of hearing you tell them.
That number's 888-393-2783. Cam, you got all your Christmas shopping done? It's almost here.
No, I've still got just a little bit. Left.
I'm almost done. Almost.
The only person I've got left for is my wife.
Me too.
That's it.
So, I leave her to the end.
Yeah.
Because she's like the hardest.
100%. And she won't tell you anything. She likes for me to try to guess. Like wants to see if I've been paying attention throughout the year.
Yeah, I don't like the I don't like the games. Yeah, no.
So this year in her stocking, she's getting divorce papers from making me play that.
Oh, it's just a joke, folks. I hope everybody out there has a wonderful Christmas. And we'll be speaking to you one more time before Christmas. But if not, please be careful. Everybody out there, stay safe. I'm Kyle. He's Cam.
Peace, y'all.